About 100 miles north of London is the hamlet of Woolsthorpe by Costleworth. Sir Isaac Newton was born here at Woolsthorpe Manor House on Christmas Day, 1642, according to the Julian or Old Style calendar. I visited in 2016 as part of a travel sabbatical relating to math history, and it was one of my favorite single locations of my 7-week-long trip through Britain and northern continental Europe. It's possible here to feel you've really traveled back in time to the 17th century. Upstairs you can see the room in which Newton was born, as well as his own bedroom, which contains portraits of him at various stages of his life, and also his death mask, which is hung above the mantel. Through the front window, you can see the apple tree, which is said to have inspired Newton's understanding of gravity. It's the tree to the left with a small fence around it. On the opposite side of the room is Newton's study, which contains a small telescope and other instruments related to optics and natural philosophy. Some of his own handwritten work is on display as well. Downstairs you'll find a living room decorated with furnishings of the time to give a feel for what life would have been like during Newton's time. Across from the living room is the dining room and kitchen. We often think of pure intellect when we think of Newton, but he was born into a time of superstition, and you can see hints of this in the kitchen. The table is set with the spoons facing down. This was to keep the devil from being able to sit in the bowl of the spoon, so that you would not end up swallowing the devil and taking him into yourself. On the wall of the kitchen, you'll also see what's called a witch's mark, a ritual protection symbol intended to protect inhabitants against witches and evil spirits. I've seen these elsewhere on my travels, including inside Lincoln Cathedral, about 40 miles north of Woolsthorpe, Lincoln having been my home base for travel in this area. But I digress. Back to Newton's kitchen. Here too, we can see out the front window toward the apple tree, and then head out the front door to take a look. The tree is over 400 years old. It blew down in a storm about 200 years ago, but it remained rooted and partly intact and has continued growing. Signs nearby tell the story. And in 2002, it was designated one of the great British trees at the time of the Golden Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II. Here is a view of the back of the house. Behind where I'm standing, there is a small cafe where you can relax and get some good sustenance. From the manor house, you can easily walk to the church where Newton was baptized. It's about 1 mile away. The church is St. John's of Costleworth, which is an ancient church whose origins may even date back to Saxon times or perhaps even Roman times. It has, of course, been renovated and restructured over the centuries. Here we look toward the east. Off to the left, the north side, is the organ. And curiously, in a small space behind the organ is a sundial that is thought to have been carved by a young Newton at the age of 9. Clearly, no sun can reach it here, and if you didn't do your research before traveling, you wouldn't know to look for it. These are the kinds of details that I consider treasures as I go about my travels. Looking back toward the west, we see the pulpit, and further back at the end of the aisle, the baptismal font from which Newton himself was baptized. In the room beyond is the bell-ringing chamber. I find it really impacting to think that this font, where babies are still baptized to this day, is where Newton's mother once held him as an infant for his own baptism. Before closing out this video on Newton, I'm going to share about a couple of other places linked to the life of Newton. The first is Cambridge University, and particularly Trinity College, Cambridge, and then we'll head down to London. I was fortunate on this trip that there was an exhibition at the Cambridge Library called Lines of Thought that displayed some of Newton's work, including a first edition of his Principia, which was heavily annotated by him with changes he wanted for the second edition. Newton attended Trinity College, the gate of which is shown here, and just off to the right of the gate is an offshoot of the apple tree from Newton's home that has been grafted here. Through the gate is the great court of the college, with the chapel on the north. The western end of the chapel contains statuary, including a sculpture of Newton alone on the westernmost end. Continuing across the great court, you can enter Neville's Court to the west, which is flanked on one end by the Wren Library, which dates back to the 17th century, behind which is the River Cam, for which the city is named. If you hire a punt on the Cam, you can go under the famous mathematical bridge, which has a legend about it that's associated with Newton. Moving on to London. Newton at one time held the post of Master of the Mint. This was from 1699 to 1726, or 1727, depending on if you're using the old style or new style calendar. The Mint was located in the Tower of London. There is so much history associated with the Tower of London, so there are many things to draw you here, but one of those things is the display of the Mint and information about Newton's time here. Also in London is the Royal Society, of which Newton was a fellow and later the president. The Royal Society is located on Carlton House Terrace, which is quite near Buckingham Palace. I thought the DNA structure in the door handles was quite a nice touch. There are some lovely displays inside, highlighting the work of many scientists, including various items relating to Newton, of course. I hope you've enjoyed this video taking a look at places associated with Sir Isaac Newton, especially his home in Woolsthorpe by Colsterworth, which is an amazing place and well worth a visit if you get the chance.